The things that we really want to do demand being in close touch with other people. I'm Deyan Sudjic. My most recent book with Penguin was The Language of Cities. I've had a life as a curator, a critic, an editor, and most recently as the director of the Design Museum in London. The last time cities really began to think about how they should be shaped and organised was in the late 19th century, when Europe was reeling from cholera, which was killing thousands of people every year, and cities really were not safe. So there was that generation of modernist city planners who wanted to demolish 19th century Paris and start again with huge slab blocks that were well apart, which were bathed with sunshine to kill the germs, which sounds remarkably like what some people are saying about what should happen to the city now with the pandemic. Le Corbusier, the Swiss-French architect, believed that the future was about starting again, about removing what he called the fungus of the traditional so-called organic city. Le Corbusier wanted a city that worked like a watch, which could be turned into a functioning machine in which, because people lived in high-rise apartments spaced well apart, and the ground between those apartment buildings would be, as he saw it, beautiful parkland. That was really about health. He justified that rational, ordered ville radieuse, as he called it, naturally on the basis that the old 19th century city had been racked by disease and sickness. Modernism seemed like the utopian sunlit future at first. But of course, modernism's unintended consequences were creating a new generation of slums in which we created a world which, though they might allegedly be healthier, were not places that people wanted to live in. But sometimes we find that difficult big problems need difficult big solutions. And I think we're finding that again now. The things that we really want to do demand being in close touch with other people, going to see a live performance, going to sing in a choir, going to a wedding or a birthday party. Those groups, which are not limited to 6 or 10 or 12, all these things, which are the very essence of urbanity, are challenging if we are concerned that if we are closer than 2 meters to someone, we're going to catch something horrible from them. The traditional high street or outside the UK, the smaller shopping mall were under threat already. Those things are now terminal. There's no going back. The idea of the van delivery is now embedded deeply in the mainstream. The shop of the future, or the shop of the very near future, will either be you make an appointment, you go and see an exquisitely designed store that looks like an art gallery in which the door has a doorman or 2 doormen, and you're allowed in one at a time, and it's a timed experience. And it's a bit like the 19th century gent will go to their tailor to have a fitting, and that would be one end of the spectrum. And the other is the Amazon store, in which there are no people, no cash changes hands, and you've probably worked out what you're going to buy before you go there. The way that we emerge from the epidemic will be very critical to understanding what cities or homes will look like in the decades to come. 3 months of being inside has made a lot of people realize that multiple spaces are important. It's been so different from those who really suffered, which has been those who've had to share small apartments with families or with people that they're sharing with. And I think it's re-emphasized how important it is that we do build for the future with decent minimum space standards. We now have a density of bicycling to match that of Amsterdam or Denmark, and that has to be a positive thing. It makes people fitter. It creates a situation in which you are fighting back some of that use of the car. It's amazing how the pavement and the street has now, starting with the Baltic countries, where, because you couldn't use indoor cafes, suddenly the Latvians and the Estonians declared all their city streets potential pavement zones. I think we are now at a moment a little bit like the realization that the 19th century had about what cities had become. Britain invented the industrial city and was kind of horrified by what it had done as soon as it saw it. And the response was to build the garden city, to move out of the densely built up centre And it took 50 years for the affluent to rediscover city centres. And maybe now the idea of the affluent again leaving the city centre could take place. We are now more suspicious of globalism and that sense of the world cities, London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, populated by people who could live anywhere they chose, again is becoming questioned, I suppose. So we could be on the edge of a moment in which that dense city centre core will again be questioned. Will we go back to the cellular office is open plan in which you share one gigantic room, no longer going to be the norm, could well be. So we could be looking at smaller office buildings in which there are more intimate spaces which you use on your own. So I think it's a mixture of the technical, like self-cleaning lifts, lots of smaller lifts, and what you could call more the emotional, creating places that feel safe, that feel comfortable to be in. What is it that persuades some of the smartest people on the planet to go and work in the one giant building that Apple built itself? Well, I think it's a lot to do with the fact that Silicon Valley is on the edge of San Francisco. And San Francisco is the traditional city in which you have pavements and crowds, and you can actually go and do those things which are the shared experiences. So I think that based on that, there are still geographical constraints. You won't put office space absolutely anywhere. It needs to be somewhere that feels like near somewhere, near a place where you can, when you choose, go and do those things that are so important to feeling human, to feeling like a citizen of a place. I think anyone who looks at the world through the perspective of design has to be an optimist. Design is a suggestion that there are better ways of doing things, that an intervention can make life a little bit better, a little more different. I think we have to understand that a city is not a scientific network. A city is, organic's the wrong word, but a city is a complex organism. So I think we need to be aware that cities are both about intentions, but also about those accidents.